Okay, we come to the start of tape 2, and already we've moved a very long distance, both in the story and in the various elements that are being introduced into it. And one of the things that has come up a number of times and will come up many, many more times in the next hour or so is this subject of symbolism. It's not just that these symbols are signatures, and it's not just that they have them because it's almost a secret language, which it is. There's another major reason for symbols and why certain things are in certain places and why certain street plans are in a certain design rather than another. And that's because, and we'll get into this in the final tape in much more depth and detail, but everything that exists is energy. When you resonate energy to a certain frequency, that affects us in a certain way. You can look back at the sun cycles, for instance. The sun cycles affect us in different ways at different points in the cycle because it is a different vibration of energy. It's a different type of energy. In fact, it's the same energy, it's just a different expression of it. So if you have this knowledge, and I keep emphasizing this knowledge has been available to this few that have passed it on through initiation at the highest level of the secret society and mystery school network since the ancient world, since these bloodlines were introduced. If you know that knowledge, then you can use it to affect consciousness, to resonate, for instance, the energy field of a city in a certain way, which helps you to bring about your agenda and helps people to react and to be in a certain state of being, because they keep being affected by this repeating frequency. So this is why you look at the street plan of Paris, and I'm going to look at the street plan of Washington after this too, and you see the tremendous consistency in the way that these cities are created. But let's start with Paris. Here we have, as I mentioned in the first video, the Arc de Triomphe, which is a street plan representation of that symbol of the sun on the cross with the zodiac circle from the ancient world. But it's not just that, the 12 roads off and that symbolizing the sun. It's more than that. This is just a central point in this sequence, this pattern in Paris, which is one of the big, big centers of these ruling bloodlines. There's a close-up of the Arc de Triomphe looking down dead straight down the road which goes dead straight in that direction and dead straight in this one. And when you look in the direction we've just been looking at, in exact straight line with the Arc de Triomphe, you see this big modern arch, and there's another pyramid, but the big modern arch. The arch is a big symbol of Freemasonry. This is where we get Royal Arch of Freemasonry from. And the arch is very much a symbol of this secret society network, the Freemasons being one expression of it. So if we look again down in that direction, you see that modern arch straight down that road. Okay, now turn and look in the other direction, which is what we're doing in this shot. There you have the eternal flame, the Illuminati, the torch, and you're looking through that crowd there, dead straight down one of the most famous, if not the most famous, streets and boulevards in Paris, the Champs-Élysées. And if you go dead straight from this point, you go through that. The obelisk, the 3,200-year-old obelisk that was actually taken from Luxor in Egypt, one of the great sacred places, the Valley of the Kings and great sacred places of ancient Egypt, and it was put in Paris in this square. And again, it's dead straight with the Arc de Triomphe, dead straight with that other arch. We'll go on beyond that obelisk, and you see another arch, the three arches. That's also secret society symbolism, almost a kind of smaller representation of the Arc de Triomphe. And if you look through the center there, there's the obelisk of the one from Luxor. And if you keep coming straight, again, dead straight line, we're still moving from the Arc de Triomphe, you come to this thing. Our old friend, the big black glass pyramid I mentioned earlier, which was put there during the presidency of Francois Mitterrand. Why did they put that there? Because it was part of an emerging geometrical pattern in the street plan of Paris, which resonates the energy of that city, that key city to this brotherhood, and a certain vibrational range which they want to happen. So let's look now at Washington, D.C. Thousands of miles away across the Atlantic, but the same principles apply yet again. These images come from a book called Talisman of the United States. Excellent book, not terribly easy to get hold of, it seems. And the writer looked at the history of the building of Washington and how, when they built it, they put in the street plan, esoteric symbols, astrological symbols, and classic symbols like pentagrams and what we call Stars of David. And there you see a Star of David in the street plan of Washington. There's the Capitol building down the bottom. But it's not a Star of David, funnily enough. It's nothing to do with the Jewish race, the Jewish people. When you look back into the ancient world, this symbol can be found all over the place in the ancient Arab world and the ancient Hindu world, etc. Became associated with Jewish people after the Rothschilds started using it when they developed their banking empire in Frankfurt in Germany and then wider afield. But again, you see in the street plan of Washington, the way it was designed from the start in the District of Columbia, District of the Dove. This is why we have British Columbia. It's why we have Columbia Pictures, why we have Columbia Broadcasting, CBS. They're all Queen Semiramis dove symbolism. And incidentally, just as an aside, look at the symbols of those organizations. The symbol of Columbia Pictures, the lady with the lighted torch. Look at Columbia Broadcasting, the eye, the all-seeing eye, which is on the screen between every program. Columbia University, symbol, lighted torch, because they are brotherhood operations. And here in the street plan of Washington, there's the Capitol building in the center there. These streets, according to the research of Talisman of the United States, are actually lined up with where the sun comes up at the winter and summer solstice. Now, when you go back to the ancient creations and mounds and structures that were created by the Phoenicians and that white race in Europe and Britain and Ireland, you find exactly the same principles. There's a massive mound at a place called New Grange in Ireland, and there's a really narrow entrance to it, which goes right into the center of the mound, and in the center it opens up into a cavern. Only at the winter solstice, if it's a cloudless morning, the sun comes up in exact line with that and shoots its golden light straight the way through this little narrow passageway and lights up the whole of the central cavern. And apparently there's a 6-year waiting list to be in there at the time that happens. And again, it's just the same principles, the same knowledge applied to the street plans. This is why the political buildings, etc., and the Freemasonic temples are built on the vortex points in the grid that the old stone circles and that were built on also. Now, I'm coming back to the street plan of Washington in a second, but there's something I need to talk about before we come back. What you're looking at behind me is a place about 75 miles north of San Francisco, next to the Russian River. It's called Bohemian Grove. That's what you see behind the trees there. And Bohemian Grove has become notorious in research into not just the global manipulation politically, etc., but also into those people who are looking into satanic ritual and human sacrifice and blood drinking and all this stuff, again, which can be charted with these bloodlines from the ancient world. And behind those trees are 2,700 acres of redwood forest, Bohemian Grove, where, and again, in The Biggest Secret and some of my other books, I document how people are sacrificed there, the blood drinking and stuff goes on, involving some of the most famous people in America and also from further afield, presidents and business leaders and stuff like that, the Henry Kissingers of this world and the Bushes and people like that. So here you have the entrance to it, no through road, as far as I could get before it was no further. Here is a picture taken at Bohemian Grove in 1957. The guy standing up there is called Glenn Seaborg. He helped to develop plutonium. I think he was involved in the Manhattan Project that created the bombs that were dropped on Japan, etc. But look either side of him. To his right, you have Uncle Ron, Ronnie Reagan. Back in '57, just a B-movie actor. Going to be president of the United States. What, old Ron, you must be joking. Well, he became president. On the other side of Seaborg is Tricky Dicky, Richard Nixon, who went on to become president of the United States. And it's through these organizations, these elite secret societies and groupings like Bohemian Grove, that presidents and the other people in positions of apparent power, that's the route that puts them into these positions. Not surprising. Now, here's another picture at Bohemian Grove. Just concentrate a bit on this one, because it was taken on a long, long lens. Every summer, they have a summer camp in which these elite members of this brotherhood go to Bohemian Grove to do their deeds and do their ceremonies and stuff. And they do them to the same deities that this bloodline has done, has worshipped and done their rituals to, right back into the ancient world thousands of years ago, where this story started. And what you're looking at here, staggeringly, is a group of people, some of the most famous people in America, in long gowns. Behind them there, you see a 40-foot stone owl. And there's the fire between them, next to the lake at Bohemian Grove. Now, one might wonder, understandably, why the people that run the banking, political, economic system and the media in America should be dressed in long robes doing a ceremony to a 40-foot stone owl. I think we should be told myself. So what's it all about? Again, you have to go back to see the present. Back in the ancient world, these Phoenician, Canaanite, Babylonian bloodstreams, which have merged to become the controlling force in the world, they worshipped a deity called Moloch or Molech. It was a deity that was an aspect of Nimrod, who keeps coming up everywhere, of course. And what they used to do is sacrifice children to Moloch or Molech. They put them through the fire. And in the Old Testament, you see prophets condemning the people for putting their children through the fire to Moloch or Molech. When I've talked to contacts, therapists and what have you around the world who work with satanically abused people, what those people tell them is that, again, when they're sacrificing children, the deity in the modern world today that they use to sacrifice them to is Moloch or Molech. Same seamless stream. So the question comes in relation to this: how do they symbolize Moloch or Molech, this deity to which they sacrifice children? They do it, symbolize him as an owl. That's why the owl comes up all over the place. Now, when I was looking in the street plan of Washington, this is not in Talisman of the United States, this just caught my eye as I was looking through a Washington street map. I found this around the Congress building. There's a Congress building in the middle. And just by drawing in red pen on the roads within the Congress building complex, very obviously an owl appears. You can also see an owl on the dollar bill if you can magnify it enough. It has to be magnified very, very intensely, and then you see the owl in one of the corners. But when you look at the next shot, this is not being doctored by me in any way with a red pen. This is just a shot directly from a Washington street plan. And there you see around the Congress building the owl, Moloch, the deity going back to Babylon and this whole story I've been talking about. And he's actually sitting on top of a pyramid and all-seeing owl, just like the pyramid and all-seeing eye. Because the owl and the eye symbolize the same thing, this force which controls the world through these bloodlines. Also in the street plan of Washington, you find pentagrams. Symbols are not in themselves negative. The five-pointed star, the pentagram as we call it, is not in itself negative. Just as the swastika in its original form is not negative, it was just a symbol of the sun. Other things too, probably. What the Nazis did, however, was take the swastika and turn it round to indicate the negative. It's what they call reverse symbolism in Satanism. So what they do with the pentagram, which is why it's become a satanic symbol, is to turn it upside down, so it's pointing down. Reverse symbolism. It's the same with the dove, Semiramis. To the general population, the dove equals peace, love, and all this stuff. Reverse symbolism, the dove equals death and destruction. So here we have two pentagrams in the street plan of Washington. The top one points into the Capitol building, and the one at the bottom points into the White House. And not only do they reverse the pentagram to indicate the negative, another way of doing that is to distort the pentagram so it's not in a geometrically equal pattern. Some lines are longer than others, and that's what you see here. Now, if you take the road through the middle of that White House pentagram, you might call it, and you go out the other side, very soon, just a few minutes from the White House, in a direct line with it, you find a very strange building in Washington, and it is this one. What you're looking at here is a building that looks completely out of place among the streets of Washington, the Washington environment, and that whole area. The reason is this is a particularly special building to the Brotherhood. It's got the feel of an Egyptian temple. In the middle there you see that depiction of the rising sun across the over the horizon, which is what you saw on the Washington sun chair earlier, and many other symbols of this Brotherhood are that sun coming up over the horizon or over the mountains. And on the two sides of the steps you've got their symbolic depictions of the Sphinx, etc. So what are we looking at here in this strange building just down from the White House? Well, we're looking at the Supreme Headquarters, 33rd degree Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Because Freemasonry did not begin in the 16 and 1700s, as is claimed. That's when this strand of the Brotherhood got the name Freemasonry. What it really is a face or a mask on the one face that goes back to the ancient world. And this is where they're coming from, the ancient Egyptian, Babylonian world, where these bloodlines came out of a long, long time ago. Here's another more close view of that half sun coming up. And when you see it live, as it were, when you're actually there, it is a beautiful depiction of the sun. And in the back, they've got a bust of George Washington, first Freemasonic president of the United States. This is a political building, so we're told. In fact, it's a temple to a secret society, built by the Freemasons to a specific design, Congress, the Congress building. Where did it get its name from? Capitol Hill, from a sacred place of the Roman Brotherhood going way back called Capitoline Hill. And when Madeleine Albright, high priestess of this Brotherhood, became Secretary of State, and she went across on her first overseas visit to Europe, she actually went to Rome and made an official visit, what for her would have been a pilgrimage to Capitoline Hill in Rome, and that's where we get Capitol Hill from. Now, they build these buildings in specific designs. This is where you see obelisks and domes everywhere in the major cities. It's because the dome resonates and draws in female energy, and for obvious reasons, the obelisk, the phallic, draws in male energy. And so in particular places, in particular cities, in particular locations of politics or whatever, religion, you get the dome and the obelisk. So just take a look, just for a second, at that dome on a political building in Washington. And there it is again. This time, it's St. Paul's Cathedral, in the heart of the city of London, one of the epicenters, this global manipulation. And St. Paul's Cathedral was built on an ancient site of worship to the goddess Diana, and was built by Sir Christopher Wren, one of the high initiates of this secret society network, after William of Orange arrived in London to be King William III, and the whole thing epicentered in London. There is St. Paul's Cathedral. There's another view of St. Paul's Cathedral. Looks like it, but it's not. This is the Pantheon in Paris. Again, a mirror image of St. Paul's Cathedral and the Congress building, this time in the other great Brotherhood epicenter city of Paris. The obelisk, there we have the Washington Memorial, the phallic symbol of the obelisk. And this goes to, again, to ancient Egypt with the story of the penis of Osiris. It was apparently lost, and Isis got another one, all that stuff they talk about. And since that time, this has become the symbol of the male energy, the male phallic. And I must say, just a brief story. These symbols are actually manifestations of thought. So what these are built to represent is what they generate in terms of energy. I was inside a massive obelisk near a place called Hebden Bridge in England. And as I was climbing the stairs, it was so big it had a stone staircase inside it, the energy around me I just felt this enormous male sexual energy, and I thought, what's going on? Especially when you get to my age, you know. And then I realized, why am I feeling this? Well, what are you walking up inside, you pillock, I thought. You're walking up inside a representation of the male phallic, therefore that's the energy it generates. It's very important that we're aware of this. These are not just symbols and what have you, in a secret language alone. They generate energy. And this is why you have these in specific points in the major cities, just like the domes. So here's the Washington Monument, the biggest stone obelisk in the world, right in the center of the Washington Street Plan, down from the White House. This is what's known in London as Cleopatra's Needle. Again, like the one in Paris, it was taken from Egypt. It's an original. It was in the city of Hon or Heliopolis, the city or place of the sun, and was brought over during the reign of Queen Victoria. Again, this is on former Templar land. The Temple Bar is just across from here, where the center of the secret society network of the legal profession is based, in the former Templar land of Temple Bar. Here's, again, this 3,200-year-old obelisk in the city of Paris, from Luxor in Egypt. No accident. There's another one in Central Park, New York, I understand, as well. Here in the wholly owned brotherhood city of Las Vegas, where they had a blank sheet of paper to start with, a blank sheet of land, they have just filled it with the symbolism of thousands of years. And here you have the big black pyramid, the casino. Again, that will be resonating energy in a certain way in that place of Las Vegas. There you have the big Sphinx, and there you have the obelisk as well. Now, one of the other things they do is that they symbolize the sun and the moon, in the sense that they put the building representing the sun, like the Arc de Triomphe, and they put next to the building what they call a reflecting pool. And the reflecting pool, this is the Lincoln Memorial in Washington here, just down from that obelisk, the reflecting pool reflects the building. In other words, the building is the sun, the water is the moon. And here's that symbolism again in Dealey Plaza this time, with the obelisk that the Freemasons put up there after Kennedy was killed. And again, it is the male phallic, the obelisk, reflected in the reflecting pool, which symbolizes the moon. They understand how these moon and sun energies can be used and manipulated, and that's one of the great areas of knowledge that has been kept from the rest of the population in the secret society network. And this goes back a very long time. Interestingly, it is this brotherhood network that created Christianity and created Islam and all the other religions, and the biggest secret documents this in great detail. They created the religions as a prison religion and to imprison the mind of the populace, but they also built the cathedrals and the main churches, and they built them on the vortex points, on their sacred points, in a certain way. Again, I mentioned St. Paul's Cathedral was built on a former site of goddess Diana worship. The goddess Diana was one of the great goddesses of the ancient world. This is Notre Dame, Our Lady Cathedral in Paris, one of the most famous cathedrals in the world, Notre Dame. Because people thought Notre Dame, Our Lady, Mother of Jesus, it was taken as a Christian name. In fact, Our Lady is Isis, Semiramis, Diana, and these other names for the deities that the Brotherhood have worshipped over the period of thousands of years we're talking about. So look at that. That's Notre Dame, built with Templar money, Knights Templar money, to sacred geometry on a sacred vortex point. Now we'll just cross the English Channel. There's Westminster Cathedral. Could be the same building. Again, built with Templar money in that same period on a great vortex point. And you've got Big Ben to the left there, the famous clock on the Houses of Parliament, and that is a massive obelisk. And the Houses of Parliament, like Congress, are built on a sacred vortex point. The political buildings are actually temples. Interestingly, this is on Notre Dame Cathedral, and these are the gargoyles. Now, when you look at gargoyles, what are they? They are depictions of reptiles, reptilian forms, often with wings. Bizarre and amazing as it may seem, and I'm the first to agree with that, this is how ancient and modern these reptilians are described in ancient texts and by people who've seen them, and again, the biggest secret documents this in enormous detail. So on the cathedrals and on the stately homes of the British and European aristocracy, you find these reptiles. You also find them on or around a modern airport, Denver Airport. Why are gargoyles in Denver Airport? A modern airport built controversially and for an enormous amount of money in more recent years. It just so happens that those that research into these things, into the extraterrestrial influence on Earth, have designated that, and has some of the people involved in its construction, as a reptilian base, an Anunnaki base, actually in Colorado. In Dealey Plaza, where they killed Kennedy, one of the buildings of Dealey Plaza has gargoyles all over it. Why? Because this is symbolic of the bloodlines and where the bloodlines actually come from and what they're controlled by. This is a depiction 5,000 years BC in the Ubaid culture, the one that just preceded Sumer in what we now call Iraq, and this was a depiction of one of their gods. And again, the reptilian, lizard-type humanoid figure, ancient and modern, keeps coming up again and again, and you can see it also in the states, in the coats of arms and the family coats of arms of these aristocratic bloodlines in Europe. Okay, another indication of how this symbolism works and where they're coming from. This is George Washington. In the last century, they decided they didn't have a decent statue of George, so instead of getting an American to produce one, they ordered it from Italy, from Florence. And when it arrived on the dockside, people were staggered, because here was George, the first president of the United States, depicted naked from the waist up with this cloth over his Bill Clinton's, and then pointing up one arm, pointing down the other. What's going on? Unless you realize where these people are coming from, it's inexplicable. Well, if you just hold that in your mind, arm up, arm down, naked from the waist up, and then Bill Clinton's covered in a piece of cloth, well, this is where it's coming from. This is the ancient depiction of the compilation of the negative force symbol that the Templars worshipped, or the high-level Templars worshipped anyway, called Baphomet. And this is why they depicted George Washington in that way. Now, the skull and bones is a symbol you can keep picking up when you're trying to read the secret language also. The skull and bones was on the flag of the ships of the Templars, which is why it just got turned into the pirate flag in children's stories and stuff like that. And there was another organization called the Russell Group, the Russell Company, the Russell Trust, and they made a fortune. It's one of the bloodline families in America. They made a fortune running opium to China for the British during the Opium Wars, when Britain took over China by getting the population hooked on drugs, which is what's happening to the global population today, just a bigger version of it. And on the flags of the ships of the Russell Company running these drugs was the skull and crossbones. And so it's no surprise that it was the Russell Trust that created one of the most infamous secret societies in America, called the Skull and Bones Society. This is a Freemasonic apron from the last century with the skull and bones on. Why? Because the Freemasons came out of the Templars, and the Templars used the symbol of the skull and bones. In various paintings, not just the one I talked about earlier, the Leonardo da Vinci depiction of the Last Supper, but also in many others, you see the symbolism in the painting. This is one called The Ambassadors, which is in London on display. And at the bottom there, you see a very strange kind of, I don't know what it is. When you say to people, what do you think this is? They go, well, I don't know what that is. It's strange. What is it? What's he doing there? But if you look at it from a particular angle, and it has to be from a particular angle, then you start to see what that is in that painting, and it is a skull. And the skull and bones is a constant symbol through these thousands of years of this brotherhood. This is a coin from a legal fraternity in America. There's the skull and bones again. There's the owl at the top, Moloch or Molech. And these symbols keep recurring whenever you're looking at a brotherhood organization. And this is the headquarters of the Skull and Bones Society in Connecticut. It's right next to the Yale University campus. And the Skull and Bones Society, created by the Russell Trust, pulls in 15 very highly selected students every year from the bloodline families, and they go on, in terms of the ratio, in very large numbers to enter the positions of power in America, both in front of the camera and behind the scenes where the real power is. The most famous Skull and Bones member today is George Bush, former president of the United States. His father, Prescott Bush, one of the people who through the Harriman organization helped to fund Hitler, was also a Skull and Bones member. It's very much a bloodline family operation. And it's part of a deeply, deeply satanic black magic network right across the world. On the other side of that coin, by the way, just incidentally, you see the scales of justice. The scales of justice, you know that lady who kind of stands there holding the scales on the court buildings of the world and stuff? That's actually a goddess from ancient Egypt, again, called Maat, or Maat, spelled M-A-A-T, and that's what that is. It's nothing to do with justice. It's another brotherhood symbol. Again, you see them everywhere. You go in any Freemasonic temple or secret society building, and you'll find, again, the black and white squares on the floor. And this is not just Freemasonic. Again, you go back into the ancient world, you see the same thing reoccurring. The floor is black and white squares. This is a policeman from England, and I've noticed in America, you see the same thing, the black and white squares on the uniform and what have you. That is to indicate the Freemason secret society, although most policemen don't realize this. Now, this is Westminster Abbey, and the same you'll find in Notre Dame and these other so-called great cathedrals of the world. The floor is black and white squares. Why? Because the same brotherhood that uses this symbolism built the things and controls them to this very day. When you get into the transnational corporations, again, you see the symbolism. Because as we'll come to as we go along in a few minutes, all these apparently unconnected areas of our lives, banking, transnational corporations, oil companies, connect into the same group, the same controlling force. And so all over the major companies of the world, banks and what have you, you see the brotherhood symbols. This is Arco, Atlantic Richfield Oil Company, and there its symbol, the pyramid with a capstone missing, looked at from above. One of the classic symbols. Chevron. What you need to do to see the symbolism of this is to see this not as two one-dimensional ticks, but as two three-dimensional boxes, one on top of another, which is very symbolic in the secret language. One square equals we control all that is right, all that is just, all that is fair. This is where we get everyday phrases from, like a square deal or being fair and square. One square on top of another square in any form means we control all that is right and all that is wrong, all that is positive, all that is negative, all that is just, all that is unjust, all that is this, all that is that. We control everything. And so that's what that's saying. And so appropriately, when you look in the main lobby of the Houses of Parliament in Britain, you find the two squares, one laid on the other, the so-called eight-pointed star, and that says we control everything in the Brotherhood secret language. Also, as I travel the world, the number of times I see police forces have their badge in the center of two squares laid on top of each other. This is Sussex Police in Britain, but I've seen it all over the world, the same thing. Very appropriate. We control everything. One of the most important strands of this bloodline, going back to the Anunnaki of the ancient world and this hybrid race that was created, is France. And particularly an area of France and near across the German border called Lorraine, or Alsace-Lorraine. And the House of Lorraine has been a real home for the purest of these reptile Martian or reptile-human bloodlines. And the House of Lorraine developed this symbol, the double cross. See that there on this guy. Double cross. That's where we get the phrase being double-crossed, being manipulated. How appropriate. And so you take the double cross, and we see it in the modern world in Exxon, the Rockefeller-controlled or guided oil company, with the double cross in the symbol. Again, to the uninitiated, people would look at that and say, oh, it's just a symbol, mate. but actually to the initiates who run this show, it actually means something. A Texaco oil company, esoteric symbols again, the circle, the pentagram, and the T-cross of Freemasonry, the Tau cross it's also called. Again, symbols are talking to the subconscious. When you look at that symbol, you can't hear words coming off it in a conscious way, but it's actually resonating an energy that talks to the subconscious. This is why advertisers who are in this knowledge stream manipulate advertising in a way that they use certain colors, certain phrases, certain symbols to talk to the subconscious and get us to then buy the product in a conscious way, thinking we've made the decision when we've been stimulated from a much deeper level. Subliminal advertising is massive. Amoco, the oil company with the lighted torch. Again, the same symbol that keeps recurring all over the place. The British royal family, the Windsors, are one of the most identifiable of these reptile human bloodlines that have been controlling the world increasingly powerfully for so long. In the ancient world, on caves and underground areas in Cappadocia, an ancient Phoenician center, you find the splayed cross on the wall, what we call now the Maltese cross. And so appropriately on the crown that crowns the monarch of England, this is the crown on which, or with which, the Queen of England was crowned back in the 50s, 1953, you see, again, the Maltese cross, and that keeps coming up again and again. Also on that was the fleur-de-lis. The fleur-de-lis is a symbol of Nimrod. Here are some of the sticks the Queen holds, you know, in the ceremonies and stuff, scepters they call them. And once again, you see the Maltese crosses and the doves. The dove, Queen Semiramis, the deity of Babylon, on the various scepters and bits and pieces that they use in their royal ceremonies and regalia and heraldry and stuff in Britain, because this to an initiate means something very significant. This is the Dutch royal family. Again, you've got the splayed cross, the Maltese cross, and the Dutch royal family are the same bloodline as the British royal family, because the royal families of Europe are one bloodline, just offshoots of it. And all the surviving royal families of Europe are blood related to William of Orange, William III, who helped this scam to really motor when he became King of England, as I talked about earlier. And one of the members of the Dutch royal family is a guy called Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, and he'll come up as we go along, good mate of Prince Philip, both knowingly manipulating this agenda I'm talking about. So we go to the Nazis. Now, of course, the Allies were against the Nazis. I read that somewhere too. But it's funny, the same symbolism comes up. On this Nazi, you've got the Maltese cross. It was a big Nazi symbol. You've got the flying disc, which was a symbol of the sun in Egypt and other ancient cultures. And as we go along here, here's the classic Heil Hitler symbol. What was that? It was a symbol from a ritual of a secret society, a satanic secret society called the Order of the Golden Dawn, involving a guy called Aleister Crowley, which was working through both the Allies, the British, and the Nazis during the Second World War. And here's a guy who's he collects them, this fella. Another Nazi, look, he's got the Maltese cross. He's got the skull and bones, he's got the reverse swastika, the sun symbol of the Phoenicians, and he's got the eagle, which is symbolic of the phoenix, the sunbird of the Phoenicians and the Egyptians. And this is why you see eagles everywhere, in coats of arms and national badges, not least the United States. Here it is. The original, apparently, coat of arms of the United States actually had a phoenix until it was switched to the eagle. And if you count the number of arrows there, the number of feathers, the number of letters in that name, and all this massive symbolism, they all add up to key esoteric numbers like 13, 9, etc., because initiates created this. Every so often there are certain events and certain people which pull in all strands of the various elements I've talked about so far over these hours. And the assassination, because that's what it was, of Diana, Princess of Wales, had all these elements of bloodlines, of royalty, of secret societies, and of the symbolism of the secret societies in the actual assassination itself. In The Biggest Secret, I've gone into this in tremendous detail in one chapter in particular, and there is a video documentary planned of this Diana assassination and the background to it. Maybe it will even have been done and be available by the time you see this. So I'm not going to go into the Diana thing in great detail here because it's done elsewhere, but I just want to go through a few things. From close confidants of Diana, it's very clear that she realized after a while that she had been pulled in for a specific purpose. She used to call herself the Windsor broodmare. The Spencer family is an ancient bloodline which is interbred with many of the aristocratic families of Britain, of Europe, and of America. Spencers are distant cousins, for instance, of the Rockefellers. And she realized that they'd drawn her into the Windsor web because they wanted her genes. They wanted to fuse the Windsor genes with the Spencer genes to produce another version of a genetic hybrid with a particular genetic structure. And from the very start, it's clear when you look at the story and the information that she was pulled in and identified for this from a very, very early age. She was actually brought up on the Sandringham estate and knew the Queen and Prince Charles and stuff from a very early age. The Windsors are, this is the Queen here, an ancient reptile human bloodline. And I was kind of surprised, although my research was going that way, to be told that by a confidant of Diana that her nickname for the Windsors was the lizards or the reptiles. And she used to say, in all seriousness, they're not human. And she knew far more about this background by the time she died than people in the public domain would ever realize. And she'd certainly realized what the Windsors were about and where they came from. Now, this is a guy who has been going around saying that Diana and his son Dodi were assassinated. I haven't got time to go into why someone might feel it acceptable for their son to die in a road crash, but if you read The Biggest Secret, you can see some of the background to this. If we start judging when you look at the background to Diana's assassination, the person that had complete control of her security and her movements in the crucial period, days leading up to it, but particularly on that specific day, was Mohammed al-Fayed. And when you look at his background, as I've said in The Biggest Secret, you know when Mohammed al-Fayed is trying to kid you, trying to tell you something that's not true because his lips are moving. It's the way you can see it, because this guy has lied his way through his whole economic and business career. And he's done exactly that over Diana's assassination. There was a guy that I've mentioned a number of times in my books called Tony Blair. Tony Blair was brought through by this brotherhood to become Prime Minister of Britain. And I have a contact who, for a long time, performed satanic ceremonies in which ritual human sacrifice took place of children and of adults. And one of the key places, which I've talked about in my books, is a place known as the Castle of Darkness in Belgium. In the late 80s, she says that at a ritual sacrifice that she performed was the Queen of England, which she's done sacrifices for many times, the Queen Mother, Tony Blair, who was then just a lower-ranked politician, and Mohammed al-Fayed, father of Dodi. And yet in the public arena we get this royal family on one side and Dodi Fayed's father, Mohammed al-Fayed, on the other, when in fact they lock into the same controlling force. And he had control of her movements on the crucial day. There's the Isis symbol of ancient Egypt, very close to that headgear that he posed with for a British newspaper. Now again, if you're going to kind of follow the symbolism and the background to Diana's assassination, you have to go back into the ancient world. You can pick one of these reptile, one of the pure key reptile human bloodlines up in Troy, ancient Troy, which is what we now call Turkey. You can follow this bloodline through the Caucasus Mountains and into Europe, and into what we call France. In fact, France is named after these people. They called themselves the Cambrian Franks. And they had a royal offshoot, and eventually became known by this royal offshoot, called the Merovingians. And the Merovingians set up the city we call Paris. You're looking at a part of the modern Paris, which is was the place that they established the original Paris. And they named the city after one of the people involved in the Trojan Wars, a guy called Prince Paris. And there's Notre Dame, Our Lady, Diana, Semiramis, Isis Cathedral. And this was where Paris kind of came out of with the Merovingians many, many centuries ago. Now, these Merovingians, and they built underground chambers just outside the original Paris to do their sacrifices and ceremonies to the goddess Diana. Of course, as Paris has got bigger and bigger, the area of that sacrifice area for the goddess Diana is now modern Paris. And it's still an underground chamber. That point is called the Pont d'Alma Tunnel, where Diana died in 1997. And Diana is actually blood related to the Merovingian line. This is the Ritz Hotel, owned by Mohammed Al Fayed, and all around the square, it's called the Vendome, you see at first floor level depictions in gold of that symbol I talked about a long time ago, the circle, the cross, and the sun on the center. And it comes from one of the French kings, one of the Louis, who was known as the Sun King, who built the Palace of Versailles. And in the back of the Palace of Versailles, in the grounds, is a depiction of the goddess Diana, which this aristocratic bloodline network very much focus on as one of their deities. Someone said, this is the Kennedy assassination here, something very true. When you're trying to understand who was behind an assassination, look at who had the power to remove the security at the crucial time. Because he said assassinations don't just happen, they are allowed to happen. And when you look at the footage taken on a camera, a video camera, by a member of the public when Rabin, the Israeli prime minister, was assassinated, it's extraordinary. You have the line of soldiers lined up to protect Rabin as he came to his car, and in among them is the guy who killed him. As Rabin appears on this video, extraordinary sight, the soldiers just walk backwards, leaving the assassin on his own. Rabin walks past him, thank you very much, good night. And it's the same with the Kennedy assassination and so many others. This is the point where Kennedy was hit. This is Kennedy's car at the front. There's nobody on it. And yet you look at the car behind, which doesn't carry the President of the United States. There's 4 security guards and 2 outriders. If they'd have been there, of course, Kennedy could not have been killed by a bullet from outside because he was so well protected. But the whole thing was removed, the security, to allow it to happen. And it was the same in Paris on that night. This is the back entrance to the Ritz Hotel where the car left because it was decided by Mohammed Al Fayed on the phone to his son Dodi from England that although she'd had a certain level of security all day, a Mercedes and a backup car, a Range Rover, that was suddenly, at the crucial time, going to be removed, and another Mercedes was brought in with no backup car and no security, apart from the Trevor Rees-Jones, the bodyguard in the front seat. So suddenly, classic assassination, security is removed to allow it to happen. In the car that was driven away was this guy, Henri Paul, who's been the fall guy for it, or blamed on him. He is an asset, or was an asset, of British and French intelligence, had been for a long time, and he had 4 bank accounts which had considerable amounts of money paid in the period leading up to that, not necessarily for what happened to Diana, but because he was an asset of British and French intelligence, which is the same organization. And to really appreciate how this could be done, you need to appreciate something called trauma-based mind control. During the last war in the concentration camps of Germany, in fact, way, way back this has been known about, but particularly during the last war, they started to perfect the manipulation of a natural mechanism in the mind that shuts out trauma. What they did was to understand that if you could systematically traumatize someone, their mind would shut out the memory of it and create an amnesic barrier, which would be disconnected from the rest of the mind. This is what happens when people have a major road accident and they can't remember what happened. It's because the amnesic barrier has been created to shut out trauma so we don't keep reliving the horror. Good thing. But they realized that if you could do that systematically and start with children, particularly before the age of 5 and 6, you could turn their minds into a honeycomb of self-contained compartments, none of which was aware of the other's existence. This guy was what they call a multiple, Henri Paul, which in their mind is broken up into different compartments, and so through trigger words and what have you, and trigger sentences, hypnotic keys, one amnesic barrier becomes the conscious level. That experiences something or is programmed to do something, and then he's pushed back and another one's pulled forward. It's actually got to the point where, amazing as it may seem, you can be drunk in one compartment and completely sober in the other, which is interesting in relation to what happened if you look at the story of Henri Paul. Once the programming is in there, and in the biggest secret, I put incredible documentation and background to this and what happened, and trauma-based mind control and how it creates assassins and people going crazy with guns to justify taking guns out of circulation, all this stuff. When you look at the background, all that is necessary is to probe a word or trigger action or whatever is said or done, that programming is activated. So you can be in normal mode and be very normal and no problem and never noticed anything different about old Henry that night. Trigger word, bang, programming, you're like a robot. And what gives away this is the fact that the car hit the 13th pillar. If you read The Biggest Secret, you'll see the incredible obsession with symbolism that this brotherhood has. I've been to Paris, and in that tunnel, the Pont d'Alma tunnel, there's 30 odd of these pillars. It hit the 13th. The 13 is the number that reoccurs again and again and again and again, constantly over thousands and thousands of years in all these different brotherhood groups and all these different secret societies. And it relates in part to the 1 and 12, that symbol again of the sun and the 12 months, the 12 areas of the zodiac. So all it would have needed, because the guy was missing for 3 hours that night, was the trigger word or the trigger to activate the programming, and Henri Paul suddenly goes into whatever he was programmed to do. Now, where they were going that night, and this is agreed by everyone, is from the Ritz Hotel, which is numbered 1 on this map, down to the Champs-Élysées and to almost the Arc de Triomphe, where Dodi fired there. This is the quickest way from the Ritz to the apartment of Dodi Fayed. But not that occasion did he go that way. Henri Paul went around to the Place de la Concorde, and suddenly, instead of going down the quickest way, went on to this dual carriageway that goes alongside the River Seine. He went at an increasingly fast speed and then went down into the Pont d'Alma tunnel. Now, why would he go that way? Some people say, well, he was going round to miss the traffic or whatever. But the key thing is, by going the long way to the apartment, it took him through the Pont d'Alma tunnel. It took him through this ancient sacrificial site to the goddess Diana. And what does Pont d'Alma mean? Pont d'Alma means passage or bridge of the moon goddess. And Diana, in Brotherhood symbolism, is a symbol of the moon, a moon goddess. Another interesting thing is that bodyguards, when they're in the front seat of a car, they never wear a seatbelt because they're looking after their clients and they need to react quickly. What happened with Trevor Rees-Jones, the bodyguard, is that he never had a seatbelt on when the car left the Ritz, which is normal practice. When he got to the Place de la Concorde, one of the photographers chasing the car got a shot of the bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones, still no seatbelt. literally a minute later, probably less, when the car crashed in the tunnel, Trevor Rees-Jones had a seatbelt on. The only person in the car who did, because the people in the back dirty fired and Diana did not. So either Trevor Rees-Jones knew what was coming but didn't tell his clients, or he realized at some point there was a danger going on here and didn't tell his clients. This is the Place de la Concorde, and there is the obelisk, the 3,200-year-old Luxor obelisk, which was about a minute's drive that night from the crash, and Diana went round there on the way to the scene. This is Trevor Rees-Jones. When asked why he put his seatbelt on, he says he doesn't remember, and maybe we'll never know, but it's got to be one or the other. When the car came down to the tunnel here at the Pont d'Alma, it's a series of crossroads, and that's very, very significant, because these deities who are symbolic of the moon and various energies, they're broken up into different polarities. You've got Diana, which is the positive moon energy, and then you've got the negative force, which is called Icke, which is the goddess of the crossroads, and she's symbolized by crossroads and all over the world. The Hecate satanic symbolism can be seen in the ceremonies and what have you. And so here we have a situation now where Diana, goddess of the moon, is taken into an ancient sacrificial site to the goddess Diana, dies in a tunnel which is called Bridge or Passage of the Moon Goddess, and is also covered with crossroads to the goddess Hecate, which is the malevolent symbol of the moon energy. This is the Pont d'Alma tunnel. It's very short, and I've been through it, and they keep telling me in the media it's very dangerous. I didn't really see that myself. And it's very close to the Arc de Triomphe, which is another obelisk symbol. This is the 13th pillar, and there's no way that car hit the 13th pillar, given the obsession with symbolism of this brotherhood, unless it was meant to happen. I've talked to people who are experts in this mind control, who work to deprogram people who have been mind controlled in this way. And I said to them, is it possible to mind control a driver on a subconscious level to go into that tunnel and just whack the 13th pillar? Because, of course, in the conscious level, you'd say, come on, it's not possible. And everyone has said, absolutely, for this reason. The conscious level has a certain feeling of time. So going into the tunnel at 60, 70, 80 miles an hour and then hitting the 13th pillar, you must be joking. But the subconscious level has a completely different perception of time. 60, 70 miles an hour to that is walking pace. Therefore, the programming goes in at the subconscious level, making that hit the 13th pillar at speed. Piece of cake, according to these experts I've spoken to. Diana actually survived the crash. All reports say that. But instead of being taken to hospital, where she could have got treatment that could have saved her life, she was held in that tunnel for a very, very long time. Medical experts outside of France have said it's ridiculous how long it took. About 95 minutes from the crash to get her to hospital, by which time she was clinically dead. Between the Ritz and the tunnel are 17 of these things, traffic cameras, which are filming the road which the car passed down. Had they been on that night, we wouldn't be standing here saying, well, I wonder what happened, could have been this, could have been that. We'd have seen it. All 17 were switched off in the period it took the car to get from the Ritz to the tunnel. Not only that, people who were tuning in that night in Paris to the police frequencies, as some people do, have reported that the police frequencies in central Paris were also switched off in the period it took the car to get to the tunnel. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. This is the shot that that particular camera would have had. The Mercedes came in on this side of the road, and had that camera been on, everyone would have known by now what happened. They could have seen it, but it was switched off, or at least we're told it was. And so we have a situation in which Diana was held in that place for all that time, and she was clinically dead by the time she left it. And the question has been, even from people who've said, yes, it was an accident, why did they do that? Because according to the strict and obsessional symbolic ritual of this brotherhood, she had to die in that underground chamber on the site of ancient Diana worship and sacrifice to Diana. There's no way she was going to be allowed to leave the tunnel until she was dead, and so they kept her there all that time when most doctors, as some have pointed out, would have had her at a hospital as quick as possible, and she'd still be alive today, almost certainly. So the Diana story is just full of endless symbolism, and I'm just skipping the surface here. The detail is absolutely mind-blowing. This is the top of the Pont d'Alma tunnel, and as I mentioned earlier, there is the depiction of the flame held by the Statue of Liberties in Paris and in New York, standing on a black pentagram, the classic satanic symbol. And that is where they take the flowers and stuff now. This area of Paris with the Eiffel Tower, the River Seine, is an ancient sacred site to this brotherhood. And it's absolutely no coincidence that this is where they brought Diana to die that night. Indeed, when you go through her life in general, you find that the symbolism of the goddess Diana comes up again and again. When she married Prince Charles, they married her in St. Paul's Cathedral. St. Paul's Cathedral is on an ancient site of goddess Diana worship. And when they brought her coffin out of Paris, it wasn't with the Union Jack and the flag of the country, it was with the flag of the royal family, full of these old symbols of the sun going back to the ancient world. And as I've pointed out many times, and with a lot of supporting evidence, the British royal family were definitely involved in her murder. Interestingly, when the crash happened, this guy comes into focus. This is Diana's brother, Earl Spencer. And there's one or two questions I'd like to ask him, really, because the symbolism of the goddess Diana in the ancient world related again and again to the tree grove, which is the sacred place to the goddess Diana. That's where they used to worship her, in the tree grove. Lakes and islands. Those three things keep reoccurring again and again and again in the stories of the goddess Diana. This is where they put her grave, on an island, in the tree grove, in the middle of a lake on the Althorpe estate, the Spencer estate. And those decisions, at least on the surface, were made by Earl Spencer. He also said in a BBC television interview that after the crash he had a dream in which he was told to put 4 black swans on the lake around the grave. And the next day he said he called his estate manager and asked, where do I get 4 black swans? And his estate manager apparently replied, according to the official story, you've heard then. You've heard what? We've just been given 4 black swans. Okay, well, the pigs are filling the room again. I don't really accept that. What is the symbolism of 4 black swans? First of all, when you look into the mind control programs, the swan is very symbolic to the mind control programs. But there's another one. Just take Swan Lake. Swan Lake, in which the white swan, symbolic of the positive, was killed by the black swan, symbolic of the negative. And here you had the positive Diana energy killed by this brotherhood, and the 4 black swans on the lake are tremendous symbolism, occult symbolism of that negative force overcoming the positive. And in the Althorpe estate now you have this, what you might call temple to Diana, and on many of the aristocratic estates and stately homes of England that carry these reptile human bloodlines, you find either temples to the goddess Diana in the grounds or areas of the stately home handed over to the goddess Diana. So this lady was a great example of the way that people are not just assassinated, but are assassinated in a way that follows ancient ritual. Because ritual is very powerful. If you do things in a certain ritual way, it generates a much more powerful energy than if you just killed someone in a straightforward way. But as I say, in The Biggest Secret, I go into this in enormous detail, and the symbolism is just stunning of this event. Okay, we're in the modern world. we've come a long way over thousands of years. This brotherhood, as it came out of the Near and Middle East into Europe and then through the British Empire across the world. And we're now at the point where the control of the globe is possible. And we're also at a point, a crossroads, where we can choose to take the road of freedom, or we can choose to stay as we are and allow this agenda to unfold and further imprison, in a most extreme way, the human race in the next few years. Just a choice. We take that choice, this is gone. But we need to make that choice and do something about it. The aim of this agenda over this long period of time has been to create this structure. And don't take my word for it, just look around the world. It's unfolding now. This is not a theory or a prophecy. It's happening on CNN when you turn on every day. You're seeing it unfold. It is to have a world government which would control a world central bank, a world currency, a world army, and a microchip population. The microchip population is already being introduced. Under that structure of world government, the army, incidentally, the world army is designed to be NATO, gathering more and more countries and then becoming the world army by stealth. Under that world government is a European Union, which is now with a single bank and a single currency and very much in place. The American Union, the America's version of the European Union. The European Union came out of a free trade area called the Common Market, the EEC. The American Union is designed to evolve out of NAFTA, another free trade area, North American Free Trade Agreement. And in 1994, APEC, another free trade area, was created in the East and the Australia area, and that is designed to evolve into the Pacific Union. Under that is designed to come nation states and regions, and then the people, with no power whatsoever to control their own destiny, because the major decisions are made at these higher levels of power, particularly the world level. The microchip is being suggested all over the world. This is a guy at Reading University in England who was microchipped as part of a kind of experiment, but it's not really an experiment. All over the world in our lives now, that we're being prepared to take the microchip. People on one level think it's about electronic tagging and it's about knowing where people are, and that's okay, that's on one level of it. But it's more than that. The guy I talked about very early on in this video series, the guy with the patch on his chest who works for the CIA against his will, he was telling me, and other people have done too, what the microchip can really do. And if we allow ourselves to be microchipped on the basis of, oh, well, it's better than having credit cards and money, that's what the cashless society is about. It's about getting people to be microchipped. And we'll never lose our child again if we microchip them at birth. All this stuff's being suggested now. But he said, you know, when people are microchipped, they are giving external control of their physical health, their emotions, and their mental processes, their mental faculties, their mental perception to whoever controls the microchip. And if everyone's microchipped, you suddenly got mass control on the end of a button, almost, of the population. That's the idea. That's what we're being drawn into as part of this agenda as it unfolds. And if we say no to one thing only and then go back to watching The Price is Right, let us say no to the microchip, because then at least we've got a bit of a chance here. The United Nations symbol came out of the Freemasonic symbolism also. The United Nations was created to be a focus for the centralization of global power, like that world government on that earlier slide. The sections in that target-type symbol of the United Nations, there's 33. Just happens to be 33 degrees of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. And it's kind of nicely framed, isn't it, with those leaves. I wonder where that came from. Oh, yes, I remember now. It's a Freemasonic symbol, again, transferred to the United Nations. These symbols of these various levels of control, the European Union has 12 stars in a circle, etc. They're all esoteric symbols. Now this, I guess of everything I've said so far, these next few minutes are going to be the most important, because I'm talking about the most powerful means of mass manipulation which has been played, this card, for thousands of years, and we're still falling for it. And it is this more than anything that's advanced this agenda to centralization of global power. I call it problem, reaction, solution. It works like this. You want to bring something in here, centralization of power, more power for the police, more power for security agencies, whatever, and you know that if you do it openly and honestly, there's going to be a reaction against it. We're not having this. This is a global fascist state. Go away. We're not standing for this. This is outrageous. That's what you're going to get if you do it openly. So you don't. What you do is you create a problem here. Could be society breaking down, so there is more crime, so people get in fear of being mugged and being burgled. Could be war, it could be a terrorist bomb, an economic collapse, whatever. And you create a problem, but you get someone else to be blamed for it. You get a Lee Harvey Oswald, you get these patsies, as they call them in America, who are blamed for events that they weren't involved in. You then get the people in general, by the way that you report your problem, to react by demanding you do something. This can't go on, do something. What are they going to do about it? And at that point, those who've covertly created the problem and got that reaction, something must be done, then openly offer the solutions to the problems they have themselves created. Problem, reaction, solution. Who benefited from the Oklahoma bomb? Not the people of Oklahoma, not the people who died and lost children and relatives in that bomb. One group of people and one group of people only benefited from Oklahoma. Anyone who wanted to centralize power even further in America. Because anti-terrorism bills went through Congress that took away basic freedoms from Americans purely and only because of that bomb. And as independent bomb experts and explosive experts have said, that fuel fertilizer device in the Ryder truck could not possibly have done that damage. It had to be done by high-tech devices on some of the pillars inside the building. So problem, reaction, solution is the classic means of advancing this agenda and getting the population to demand you do it, even though they don't know the agenda exists. And the Second World War, like the First World War, were global examples of this. As I've shown in my books like And the Truth Shall Set You Free and The Biggest Secret, come to that, the Second World War was the creation of a brotherhood, a global elite, that was funding all sides, that had control of the leaders of all sides, and just played them off against each other to create a war, a problem, which then had a solution. As again, myself and many other researchers have shown, Soviet communism was funded from Wall Street and London. The Nazis were funded from Wall Street and London, through the Bank of England and through the German subsidiaries of American and British multinational corporations, not least the Rockefeller Standard Oil. The front men of the war were Joseph Stalin in Russia, frontman for this brotherhood. You had Winston Churchill in England, whose image left us by conventional history is an absolute farce. This guy was a man of war, among many other things. In America, you had one of the classic frontmen of the 20th century for this brotherhood, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, comes from one of the elite aristocratic French bloodlines. In Germany, you had Adolf Hitler, who was put in there by a network of secret societies, the Thule Society, the Vril Society, the Edelweiss Society, that locked into this global brotherhood. And they were funded by American loans and in the way that I've just talked about. So you create two sides. Incidentally, again, sun cycles, numerology, certain years, certain things happen. You look at 1933. 1933, the number of things that happened in that year, that's when the pyramid and all-seeing eye went on the dollar bill. That's when Roosevelt stole the gold from the American people. That's when Hitler came to power. That's when Roosevelt came to power. No accident, all by design. And then you get two sides and you play them off against each other in a war. And from the war, at the end of the Second World War, in such a few years, the human race was mentally, physically, emotionally, and mentally wiped, exhausted. And in that mode, we are putty in the hands. What did people say? This can't go on. Something must be done. What are they going to do about it? What do they do about it? The United Nations, European Union, centralization of power, then we won't have another war. As I've shown in my books, documents exist that show that the Second World War was planned as the First World War was ending, probably before that. And if anyone thinks that it's not possible for a few to control the world, you're looking at it. How many people in Britain, America, Germany, Australia, South Africa, France, all these different countries, how many of those people wanted to go to war in the First World War? Hardly any of them. They want to be at home with their families, seeing their kids grow up. So why were they there? They were there because the pyramid structure and the hierarchy in this country persuaded its population they had to fight the people in this country. The little hierarchy in this country persuaded their population they had to fight this country, and these two hierarchies locked into one hierarchy, which was pulling strings of all sides. And there was a song in the 60s by a guy called Donovan, sang by a guy called Donovan, which went like this, which sums up where we're at with this. It went, he's 5'2" and he's 6'4". He fights with missiles and with spears. He's all of 31 and he's only 17. He's been a soldier for 1,000 years. He's a Catholic, a Hindu, an atheist, a Jain, a Buddhist and a Baptist and a Jew. And he knows he shouldn't kill, and he knows he always will. Killing for me, my friend, and me for you. And he's fighting for Canada, he's fighting for France, he's fighting for the USA. And he's fighting for the Russians, and he's fighting for Japan. And he thinks we'll put an end to war this way. And he's fighting for democracy, he's fighting for the Reds. He says it's for the peace of all. He's the one who must decide who's to live and who's to die, and he never sees the writing on the wall. But without him, how could Hitler have condemned him at Laval? Without him, Caesar would have stood alone. He's the one who gives his body as a weapon of the war, and without him, all this killing can't go on. He's the universal soldier, and he really is to blame. His orders come from far away no more. They come from here and there and you and me, and brothers and sisters, can't you see? This is not the way we put the end to war. And that sums up a very simple truth. When we stop playing the game, there is no game. The few can only control the world and manipulate wars if we fall for it, because we fight them and they start them. And when they've started them and we fought them, they recreate the world in the image that they want. So we went from global elite controlling both sides, conflict, United Nations, European Union, in both world wars. Power was in far fewer hands at the end of the war than it was at the start, and that was the reason for the war. Another problem, reaction, solution, which I'll talk briefly about, that is going to be played in the next few years, it would look like, maybe even sooner than that, is the idea there's some extraterrestrial invasion. These so-called flying saucers have been around for a long time. They're flown by humans. Been around for a long time. It's a very straightforward technology. But if you, going back to that knowledge, ignorance pyramid at the start, if you keep people in ignorance of what's possible, when they see things flying around that they don't believe humans can create, then they think extraterrestrial. And there's a scam being played here in which, while these extraterrestrial created and connected bloodlines have been running the world and still are all these thousands of years, that we're going to be persuaded that there's some extraterrestrial invasion coming in. And what will that justify? Centralization of global government, global army, and all these different things. And that's being played now. We're being prepared for it with more and more of these extraterrestrial stories coming out through things like X-Files, made by Fox Television, owned by Rupert Murdoch, which is owned by this Brotherhood. Things like Independence Day, made by 20th Century Fox, owned by Rupert Murdoch, who is owned by this Brotherhood. Things like Alien Resurrection, made by 20th Century Fox, owned by Rupert Murdoch, who's owned by this Brotherhood, and so on and so forth. So problem, reaction, solution happens on many, many levels. And if we keep reacting, something must be done. Oh my goodness me, save me. This will just go on we have to ask, I would suggest, a very simple question when these things happen. Who benefits? Who benefits from me believing what I'm being asked to believe about this event? And if who benefits, and invariably it does, anyone who wants to centralize power in the world, we should do a lot of thinking before we jump in and say, do it, anything to change the situation we're in. Alongside problem, reaction, solution is another technique. I call it the stepping stones technique. James Madison once said, I believe there are more instances of the abridgment of the freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachments of those in power than by violent and sudden usurpations. And what that is saying in simple terms is if you want to go from here to there, you know if you go in one jump, people are going to go, what's going on? What's going on? So what you do is you do it in little steps, each step projected as totally unconnected to the others, and suddenly you're here, and when people look back, they say, my goodness me, where did this come from? European Union has been created like that. You join a free trade area, you end up in a centralized fascist state. This is the structure throughout these thousands of years that I've been talking about, which has allowed this scam to go on. You have the elite, the brotherhood elite, because, you know, even when the Freemasons and these secret societies, the vast majority of them haven't got a clue this is going on. They'll be as surprised at this as anybody. These secret societies are compartmentalized fiercely. You only go to the next level if you're chosen to go to the next level, and that means knowledge. So most Freemasons and secret society members are not involved in this scam, only the few at the top who know what's going on. And so you have a situation with pyramids inside pyramids. It's like Russian dolls, one inside the other. So a bank is a pyramid, a transnational corporation is a pyramid, and a compartmentalized pyramid. The guy who goes to work in the bank in the morning, he's gone to earn his living so he can pay for the mortgage and look after his family. He's not trying to scam the world. But he doesn't know what he's part of. And so these fiercely compartmentalized pyramids mean that the bank is controlled by very few people. But that bank then goes into the next pyramid, the global banking system pyramid, and at the top of that, the same people control all the global banks. Same with the transnational corporations. They are individually a compartmentalized pyramid. They go into the transnational corporation global network, and at the top of that, all the transnational corporations are controlled by the same people, and they're the same people that control the banks. Same with the military, same with the secret societies, and same with the intelligence agencies, etc. Same with the political parties. And so what we've seen in this 20th century, just take the 20th century alone, is an incessant centralization of power in all areas of our lives. Why? Because all those institutions fuse into the same brotherhood, which is putting down those apparently unconnected areas of our lives, the same policy of centralization, all coordinated. This is the one-party state pyramid. Down here in the political parties at the bottom of the pyramid, you've got people who knock on your door and put the funny hats on at the conventions and political meetings and stuff. And they genuinely believe they're on different sides because they know no different. But as you go up these pyramids to the point that I'm talking about, to this brotherhood, these political parties that appear to be different in public fuse into the same leadership. So the people that supply or dictate who's going to run for president in the Democrats in America are the same people that dictate who's going to run for the Republicans. Same all over the world. It's one-party states, but we have to believe we have multi-party states and freedom and choice. Otherwise, we might rebel against not being free. We've got to be persuaded we are. And these political parties, in the end, are controlled by the same people. It's interesting. Three of the key symbols that this brotherhood has used over these thousands of years is the lighted torch, the dove, and the red rose. And the three political parties in Britain are the Labour Party, Tony Blair's government, which is the red rose symbol, the Liberal Democrats, which is the dove, and the Conservatives, which is the lighted torch. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. We are told, and the media emphasizes this, and the leaders of politics, etc., walk the world stage as if they are at the peak of political decision-making in the world. When you look at the way it really works, the presidents, prime ministers, and heads of NATO, etc., are nowhere near the top of this global pyramid. They're some way down. and they are appointed and manipulated into power by those above them that control the banking system, the media, etc., which you need to have money and media support if you're going to make these positions. So presidents and prime ministers, why they stand there as, you know, someone once said the president of America is the most powerful man in the world. My goodness me, what a joke. They are administrators of an agenda which is being decided above them by people outside the public eye mostly. This is the health pyramid, another wonderful example of how this works. You've got the transnational drug corporations controlled by this global elite. They, the transnational drug corporations, created the World Health Organization within the United Nations. The World Health Organization, as a committee called Codex, which is devising regulations to make life very much more difficult for alternative healing and food supplements, etc. The Codex regulations come down and are introduced by European and national governments, go through the medical profession, and then are imposed on the people. And the alternative health methods, I say alternative, they've been around for thousands of years, the scalpel and the drug for 10 minutes, they are being squeezed out by this edifice of power. And because the drug companies control the World Health Organization and the doctors, etc., situations can arise like this. A few years ago, the World Health Organization announced there was going to be a measles epidemic the following year. And in Britain, the government spent taxpayers' money to produce very fear-based advertisements, black and white, with a big ominous voice saying, by the end of this year, one of these children on the picture will have died from measles. Oh my goodness, fear, the manipulation of fear again. As a result of that, there was a 99.99999% take-up all over Britain of that measles vaccine. A whole generation of children had that vaccine, and who supplied the vaccine? The transnational drug companies who, through the World Health Organization, had arranged for that announcement to be made. What happened? No measles epidemic. But then you say, what was going on? What about the epidemic? They say, well, there wasn't one because people were vaccinated. So the cycle goes on and on and on. Vaccination is one of the key ways that the human body and the human immune system is being undermined according to this agenda. Over the years, different groups of these secret societies have emerged for specific tasks. And because the agenda has a specific time scale, and across the millennium is the time of introduction, through this century, this agenda has been advanced quicker and quicker and quicker. Towards the end of the last century, and right at the start of this one, a secret society was created in Britain, not surprisingly, called the Round Table. Was headed up originally by a guy called Cecil Rhodes, who was one of the bloodline families that orchestrated the manipulation and takeover of southern Africa by Britain. Also, Rhodes scholarships came out of this guy, Cecil Rhodes. I think I mentioned those earlier, where the youngsters of the bloodlines around the world are picked up and given a Rhodes scholarship to Oxford University. This comes out of the same guy. Well, he died in 1902, and other people took over. And there were roundtable groups interlocking, set up around the world. The key places were America and Britain. And when we had the First World War, the key people in the American War Administration were members of this round table, and the key people in the cabinet in Britain were members of this same round table. So they orchestrated the First World War, and afterwards, when they were deciding how the world would be redrawn as a result of the war, the very same members of the round table were appointed to the Versailles Peace Conference to decide how it would be set up and redrawn. Classic problem, reaction, solution. Create the problem, create the war, get the reaction, something must be done, and then offer the solution. At that Versailles Peace Conference, again in Paris, the cities and locations keep reoccurring, they had a meeting at the Hotel Majestic in Paris in 1919, these roundtable members, both sides of the Atlantic, and they started to orchestrate the creation of offshoot organizations around this central core that would push this agenda on through the 20th century. The first one created was the Royal Institute of International Affairs in 1920 in London. Still going strong today, a major part of this network. In 1921, in America, came the Council on Foreign Relations, which is subordinate to the London Royal Institute of International Affairs. Since 1921, virtually every president and endless major positions in the administrations of both parties have been members of the Council on Foreign Relations. You cannot become an ambassador for the United States today without being a member of this private organization. In 1954 came the Bilderberg Group, set up at the Bilderberg Hotel in Oosterbeek, Holland. And this, like the Trilateral Commission that came in 1972-73, these organizations coordinate the same agenda between apparently unconnected areas of our lives. So, for instance, the people that attend and are members of these groups are the top people in the global military, global politics, global banking, global business, global media, etc. And so through these organizations, the same policy is coordinated. And I'll just give you one example of what I mean. The Bosnian War has been an example, magnificent example, of all these elements that I'm talking about. First of all, it was problem, reaction, solution. You had the problem, the war, the reaction, something must be done, and the solution, a 60,000-strong world army under NATO control, which has advanced the agenda closer to the world army, which is the great goal of this agenda. People like Henry Kissinger, Kissinger Associates, and Lord Carrington, founding director of Kissinger Associates, were the key manipulators of the Bosnian War, among many others. So when you take that into account, and then you look at these organizations, and you look at the key peace negotiators in Bosnia, throughout that period of that war and conflict, some incredible coincidences start to unfold. When the war started, the European Union appointed the first peace negotiator, Lord Carrington. Lord Carrington, founding director of Kissinger Associates that orchestrated the war. Lord Carrington, chairman of the Bilderberg Group since 1991. President of the Royal Institute of International Affairs, Trilateral Commission member. When he failed to achieve peace in Bosnia and the war went on, along came another European Union peace negotiator, Lord David Owen, Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, and he was replaced when the war went on by Carl Bildt, the Swedish Prime Minister, Bilderberg Group. Working with them through this same period were the United Nations appointed peace negotiators. The first one was Cyrus Vance, Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations. He was replaced by a Norwegian, Thorvald Stoltenberg, Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg Group. The war went on. The horrors went on. The clamour, something must be done, got louder and louder, politically and in terms of the general public. It was time to play the sting. Onto the stage, first of all, came Jimmy Carter, an independent peace negotiator, former president. Jimmy Carter, first Trilateral Commission president of the United States, Council on Foreign Relations member. And then came the team that introduced the sting, the solution, the World Army. This was led by Richard Holbrooke, Bill Clinton's peace envoy. Richard Holbrooke, Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations. He answered to the Secretary of State at the time in America, Warren Christopher, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, who worked with William Perry, the Defense Secretary at the time, Bilderberg Group, and they answered to the President, Bill Clinton, Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, who answered to the unelected David Rockefeller and Henry Kissinger, leading executives of the Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations. The first head of the World Army appointed in Bosnia was Admiral Leighton Smith, Council on Foreign Relations. And the ambassador in the former Yugoslavia through this period was Warren Zimmerman, Council on Foreign Relations. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. But unless you do this research, you think all these people are independent, when actually they're all connected. This roundtable network also accounts for the coordination of the media, because if you look at the three television networks in America, NBC, ABC, CBS, if you look at the Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, etc., all over the world, you're looking at the people who control those organizations being members of this same roundtable network. Washington Post, Katharine Graham, Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, and so it goes on. So you have a coordinated policy, a coordinated agenda through all these different areas of our lives, including the media, which controls how that agenda and those events that you're creating are actually reported to the people. Complete stitch-up, but it doesn't have to be. It depends on us giving our power away and watching The Price is Right instead of focusing on what's going on in the world and taking responsibility for it so it ceases to happen. Just to finish the sequence, this is the administration of a Democrat, said on his election form, Jimmy Carter, Trilateral Commission member, also Council on Foreign Relations. Democrats, and here's administrations, here's CFR, TC, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations. This is more Jimmy Carter, more of the same organizations coordinating policy through this apparently elected administration. So then you get to 1980 and you think, oh, well, I'm fed up with them Democrats, and of course I'm in a democracy, and so therefore I can choose someone different because I want to change the policy, you know, and it's great being in the land of the free and all that. And so you choose Ronald Reagan. His chief advisors up there were David Rockefeller and Henry Kissinger, two of the great brotherhood manipulators of the 20th century. And then again, the names change in these various positions, but the coordinating bodies do not. CFR, TC, everywhere. More Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was a non-member, but he didn't have to be, did he, Ron? He read the autocue, did as he was told, like they all do. But he was a member of other secret groups and, of course, Bohemian Grove, as we saw earlier. Again, here you have the ambassadors, the Congress, the State Department, CFR, TC. So then you move on to George Bush. George Bush, I would refer you to And the Truth Shall Set You Free and The Biggest Secret, and I will say no more about George Bush. So there again, another administration, different names, same coordinating bodies. More George Bush, same again. So then you get to, 1992, and you say, well, I'm fed up with them Republicans. They've had all these terms, and you know, with Reagan and Bush, and I think we ought to have a change. And so along comes Slick Will from the Windsor bloodline from Arkansas, and he starts saying that he stands for change, and I stand for change, and vote for me, we need change. That was his mantra throughout that election. Well, let's see how the change took place. Here's Bill, member of all of them, got the full set, and there again, different names. We're Democrat now, because it says so. Same coordinating body, Bill Clinton administration again, same coordinating bodies. So we've come a long way in these hours so far, from the ancient world to the present day, and we have seen unfold, and I have scratched the surface here. I've just scratched the surface of the information that's available and the supporting evidence that's available because of time. But we've come from the ancient world and seen these bloodlines expand their power to the point now where they control the planet. We're also at a point of enormous change as this 26,000-year cycle comes to an end of the solar system going round the galactic sun. Always a time of tremendous change. We're starting to see it happen. People are waking up. People are starting to look at this information for the first time. And indeed, this energy of change is lifting the veil on all this for the first time in thousands of years. We're blinking into the light of what's been going on behind our backs, behind the movie screen all this time. And I repeat, this can only happen because we allow it to happen and we play a part in it happening. It's not that this group have more power than the rest of the population, nonsense. It is the rest of the population give their power to this group day after day after day. It's because we allow ourselves to be divided and ruled, because in our stunning self-righteousness, we think if we believe something, everyone else must believe it or we're wrong. It's a time to grow up. It's a time to go from spiritual childhood to spiritual adulthood very, very quickly in the time that we have available as this change takes place. And in the final video in the series, I'm going to look at what changes are taking place and who we really are. The information above all else, above all this, that this brotherhood and these bloodlines have been desperate to stop us understanding all this time. Who we are, the nature of life, and the fact there's no one on this planet that's ordinary, there's no one in this creation that's ordinary. There's just billions who've been manipulated to think they are, so we become a doddle to manipulate and control. That time is over, and we'll see that in the final video in this series. for now. Thank you very much.